All right. We just want to say that China has breached the agreement that we've made with the UN. We've agreed for a 200-mile radius within our coastline to be our area of the ocean. However, China has taken over areas that are part of the Spratly and Parasol Islands, which some is part of our 200-mile radius. Now, this has damaged us economically and environmentally. They've irreversibly damaged marine life and its reefs, and if this isn't a pose of a threat, I don't know what is. So, see, this is why you don't.
Okay. Territorial claims. China claims the entire sea as its territory, the 9-dash line. The Philippines have every right to the land, to the amount of sea that they claim. As if China wants to keep their position in the UN, they should follow the rules. Philippines has many times given their concern that China is gaining power due to the Spratly Islands and how they build their own islands there, which makes them gain power as they have military there and they are expanding their own lands. The South China Sea has a lot of resources, which in total could gain up to 5 trillion. And Philippines is a small country, which already do not gain a lot of money there. But yeah, they could get more. The Philippines do not want conflict, but if China does not cooperate, it could lead to some conflict. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so first and foremost, I need to mention that the China's 9-dash line is mainly based on historical water rights, and historical water rights are legally not authorized to EEZ. The UN Convention allows an EEZ, not a 9-dash line. Documented historical evidence proved that China wasn't the only country using the South China Sea, and that the 5 original sovereign states are the Philippines, Fiji, Indonesia, and Papua New Guinea. Yeah.
Thank you, Philippines. The opening statement now from Taiwan, please.
So our country is Taiwan, and we feel as if Taiwan, and many of you might think that Taiwan has no relevance in this situation yet. For those of you who know, Taiwan has had a long historical battle with China for their independence and for their right to territory. And so to understand better, you need to know the historical context behind why Taiwan is fighting with China. And so Taiwan originally was colonized by the Qing dynasty up till 1644, and 1644 to 1895 it was part of the Qing dynasty, whereas then the Japanese ceded Taiwan as a part of their own country and not as a part of this Qing dynasty. Yet up till 1912 it was a part of Japanese rule. And in 1912 Taiwan officially gained independence for a certain time of being until 1945, when after the results of World War II, President Roosevelt, President Margaret Thatcher, and and Chiang Kai-shek all met in Cairo, signed a declaration to inform that Taiwan would be a part of the Republic of China. And so in 1912, there was the formation of the Kuomintang, which was the leading nationalist party in China, in Taiwan, which was originally a China nationalist party, yet it was migrated over since the new beginning of Taiwan. And to understand why China doesn't simply just take over Taiwan right now, it is because of their treaty with the U.S., which claims that the U.S. will always and will support Taiwan in case of an attack by the Republic of China.
So because of the debate that was stated earlier between whether or not Taiwan was part of China, there's a lot of, I guess, conflicts going on even in modern times. So say, for example, if we were to bring up more solutions, there's a lot of limitations that are brought to us due to Chinese claims over certain territory and also in terms of politics. So in that matter, there's a lot of situations where Taiwan doesn't have a voice to speak and negotiate actual, say, for example, trade agreements and territorial agreements, even in this debate. And so what we feel is that, we should, sorry. What we feel is that, sorry. China should. Sorry. Sorry.
So, furthermore about territorial claims, the 9-dash line, although we do approve that it's being said as a historical claim, is not a claim that can now be used within international sea waters. In addition to our EEZ zone, that China and Taiwan both have certain areas where both countries now come in contact with each other. There are areas where China has been taking over certain islands and certain areas of water because of financial benefit, and has not been sharing these resources with Taiwan, although this area between belongs both to Taiwan and to China. In addition, that the 9-dash line already poses a threat as it has uses 90% of the South China Sea, which then obviously doesn't show any fairness to all countries that have any connection or any close waterways that have connections to the South China Sea.
So according to the trade aspect of things, a third of the global shipping passes through the South China Sea. So we believe that if China takes over a large portion of their territory in the South China Sea, we think that would hinder our trade, as Taiwan, we rely heavily on our economy relies heavily on trade, and therefore in 2016 we exported $97 billion in trade, and so China's rise in ambition to take over the South China Sea would make it harder for us to export and trade with other countries, as if they take over the South China Sea, they could use active interdiction, which means that they would prevent other ships and others from going to the South China Sea, and therefore, so what China is doing is that they're using the cabbage strategy in the Spratly Islands, where they would create islands artificially, and they would take over other territory in the Spratly Islands by surrounding certain islands with large military ships, and therefore they would be able to take over land. And so we think that if they do this, it would be much harder for us to trade, and in the future it could possibly lead to war, as the U.S. chief strategist Steve Bannon has stated that in the future, amongst 5 to 10 years, it would be likely that there might be a war in the South China Sea.
Okay, thank you, Taiwan. Next, we'll hear from the USA.
As the delegates of the USA, we are here to uphold the UN resolutions. We will respect the negotiations occurring between China, the Philippines, Taiwan, Vietnam, and Japan. We will take action if any of the participating countries don't abide by the UN laws that were agreed upon. If there's any situation where maritime laws are broken by the ongoing tension in the region, the U.S. will step in to prevent further conflict. Until then, the U.S. will refrain from actively participating in the negotiations.
Thank you, USA. We'll hear now from Vietnam.
Don't know how to put it on. Bit stupid. Okay. What's up? Yo.
Folks, and we've got Vietnam at the podium.
What all countries here today should understand is that Vietnam is here not only to negotiate a solution to the South China Sea dispute that is favorable to only Vietnam, but a solution that is favorable to the other countries involved in this dispute as well, and ultimately the world. We are here to challenge China's claims, China's expansionist claims on the territory of the South China Sea that they justify using the 9-dash line. What we wish is that for a clarification of this 9-dash line, and a clarification that is in accordance with the United Nations laws, the exclusive economic zone. As China is a member of the United Nations Security Council, we would like to remind all countries present today that it is rather hypocritical of China to blatantly flout these rules in such a brazen manner.
China has also recklessly put many military bases and oil rigs in other people's EEZs, and they also use the cabbage method to block off any islands that they think it's theirs. However, these islands have been China's territory before the EEZ and now have been handed over to their respective countries. China has ruined many economic industries within Vietnam and other nearby countries by sinking down one of our fishing ships and blocking off an entire island from Vietnam.
Yes, and we would thus like to conclude our opening statement, and we hope to resolve this dispute in a way that is both favorable to all parties involved and also in accordance to the laws placed down by the United Nations.
Vietnam, Japan.
Over the past few months and the last 3 years, there's been many disputes about the South China Sea. Us as Japan, we're not located in the South China Sea, but we're having many challenges with China in the Eastern Hemisphere. That being said, $141 billion passes through is from Japan's trade in the South China Sea. Many others have the same value. We believe that China shouldn't take the amount of territory they're taking since they're not close to Spratly Islands as Philippines is. Their EEZ hasn't been located in that area.
So there are also many different concerns that Japan faces hypothetically if China were to take over the South China Sea. Firstly, we have many political concerns, as China and Japan have had many disputes also over the East China Sea. Therefore, they are not very on good terms, which would concern Japan. And also, we have many social concerns, as if China, because China and Japan are on bad terms, it would affect the amount of Chinese tourism in Japan, which could also affect them economically. And we also have many economic concerns, as most of our maritime trade passes through the South China Sea. I think it's 42% of our maritime trade goes through the South China Sea. Therefore, if China were to take over the South China Sea and block off different routes, it would mean that we would have to use different routes to ship to Japan, which would use more fuel, which would damage the world environmentally. Yeah.
The China's use of the cabbage strategy and their militarization in islands in the South China Sea shows their strong ambition towards the expansion of their territory, and this will potentially lead to disruption of balance. There's strong ambition towards their expansion of the territory shows that it can potentially lead to war, and thank you. Okay, I don't.
Well done, Japan. Last opening statement by China, please. Ladies and gentlemen, John Wolf.
Good morning, fellow representative and country leaders. On behalf of the whole China, we would like to make a statement that is us truly who deserve most it, if not all of the South China Sea memorial and territory. The vast amount of resource present in the sea is rightfully ours, and we as a country deserve it the most. China is one of the world's powerhouse countries and has over 20% of the world's population. Our history with South China Sea dates back far further than any other countries, and we refuse to let up our history and the sake of the wants of other countries.
That's our opening statement.
Thanks, China. China will now issue the first challenge.
Just say directly. Read it. So when the Philippines intended the arbitration, some countries promoted, but none of them intend to resolve the dispute in good faith. Knowing that the arbitration tribunal in Philippines for the Philippines about territorial sovereignty and maritime demarcation dispute has no jurisdiction, knowing that the Chinese are unlikely to accept mandatory arbitration. Also knows that that way will not help solve the problem, but still abuse convention regulation, forced arbitration produce of the lift and proportion. Besides, the other countries from equal are obviously is another figure.
Okay, we'll hear now from the Philippines in rebuttal.
Guys read, like, what's the question? Okay, we didn't quite understand, like, hear it. Like, what specifically are we asking? Are you guys?
Someone on the Chinese panel, can you re-paraphrase in just a short amount of words the challenge to the Philippines?
I'll reread it then. When the Philippines initiated the arbitration, some countries promoted it, but none of them truly intended to resolve the issue in good faith. Knowing that the arbitration tribunal in the Philippines for the Philippines is about territorial sovereignty, and the maritime demarcation dispute has no jurisdiction, knowing that the Chinese are unlikely to accept mandatory arbitration. Also know that this way will not help solve the problem, but still abuse the convention regulation. Forced arbitration procedure to lift and propulsion besides the other countries from ECHO are obviously another figure.
Alright, so I guess part of that is why should you guys accept, give up your ocean, the ocean that you claim as yours? Well, as the world is changing, and as the world changes, you guys are trying to be a part of that modern world. You guys are participating in modern trade, you guys are participating, starting to get more modern laws, things like that, modern technology. And as that world changes, you kind of have to oblige to the new laws that come with that. With the modern world come modern laws, and you guys are part of the UN. And when you are part of a society or group, you have to sustain to your agreements that you have made. And an agreement was the ocean territory. We agreed to a 200-mile radius to your coastline. And when you look back at a 500-year-old claim, which wasn't official, there was no proper boundaries. How did you guys claim the ocean to be yours within that 9-dash line, how do you guys defend yourselves in the terms that you claim that ocean as like yours? You can say, oh, we've had this area, we've been in it, but so has Vietnam, so has Laos, so has the Philippines. What makes it any more your ocean than it makes it ours?
Thank you, Philippines. That will be something that China will have an opportunity to address in the closing statement. We'll now hear a challenge from Japan. Thank you, China. Japan? Right. Challenge.
Wait, I'm doing it. Oh yeah. Wait, I have a question. Can I ask more than one question, or can it just be one? Okay. So this is towards China. Why do you think your geographical expansion should come at the expense of other countries' economical growth?
Repeat it one more
Okay.
time. It's very clear to me, so
Okay.
guys, it's pretty clear language in my opinion. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. Hey, where's the microphone? Okay. Why do you think your geographical expansion should come at the expense of other countries' economical growth?
Well, hold the microphone up and you guys project your voice. Go ahead, China.
Okay, so why should our expansion
Okay. Why do you think your geographical expansion should come at the expense of other countries' economical growth?
The 9-dash line wasn't created 500 years ago. It was created in approximately 1920, and this was during the time when we were building up as one of the main powerhouses of the world. We mainly controlled this land, and we decided to make it our own. But when we created the 9-dash line, it eventually got buried underneath a bunch of other claims over what the territories were, the 200-kilometer radius between the countries. But originally, this was our area before any of the other things previously came, and the territorial claims or whatever. So, going back into the past and looking at what's happened, it's originally our land. So by claiming it when it's originally ours, I don't think you guys have the right to take it from us.
Okay, thank you. We'll hear a challenge from Vietnam, please.
The Spratly Island and the Paracel Islands are still disputed by countries such as Vietnam and Taiwan and Laos and etc. But then we should have a peaceful meetings about how to claim the territories in the islands. But then, as we mentioned in our opening statement, that China has sunk our ships in the area. So we need explanation for this.
Vietnam.
Okay, we have tried to come to peaceful conclusions as to where the land goes, but those ships that were trying to travel through the area that we're trying to agree on as to who it belongs, we had to send a warning and take down those ships, as you guys clearly didn't get the message that we're still discussing over who's taking control of the land. And I'd like to also mention that us as the Chinese officials, we have never mentioned that the South China Seas, all the territorial claims and materials, never actually belong to us. The official position of China is the Nansha Islands are indeed Chinese territory. and we do have sovereignty and the related maritime rights and interests to the Nansha Islands. China attaches great importance to the safe flow and the trade on the South China Sea on the international waterway, and it is our interest to come to a peaceful agreement as to what's going on, but we can't just let other countries take most of the South China Sea, because if we follow what's happening in the United Nations agreements with the 200-kilometer radius, we're going to end up losing most of the South China Sea, which is not in our interests. That's why we've ended up building the hostile, well, you suggest that as hostile, but the military bases on the man-made reefs is just to prepare us for the worst in case something we do not like occurs.
Thank you, Vietnam. Thank you, China. We'll hear now from the USA.
Closing statement.
No, I was closing statement. Okay.
Challenge their ask, suggest they have no reason to actually take it considering their ties are just very tenuous.
Can I start? So I challenge China, right? So basically, my point is, right, China has originally claimed this 9-dash line, 100 years ago? If the U.S. right now claimed the Pacific Ocean as our territory, right, in 100 years, would that claim suddenly be more valid? Would it be more valid? Because we're the most powerful nation in the region, right? Just like China. Is that correct, in your opinion?
So you're saying your argument that violent control over the whole Pacific Ocean makes it equivalent to us coming to a relatively peaceful agreement over the South China Sea?
Building military bases is not peaceful.
We have not done anything to those military bases. According to Taiwan, we've set an agreement with Taiwan. Taiwan has set, Taiwan and you and the U.S. delegates have agreed that if we do anything to Taiwan and or anything negative or negatively influence their trade routes, you'll take action in accordance to that. We assume that's the case for most other countries, so we're just preparing for the worst with those bases. We want to set up and make sure, because it may seem like we're one huge country and we can take out a bunch of smaller other countries. But if you guys all were to start building up your army, we need to be prepared for that. So that's the reason why we have those mini bases, the military bases set up on the man-made reefs. But your argument saying that if, say, the Americans could take over the whole Pacific Ocean 100 years ago, there was no set rule or agreement that let you control the Pacific Ocean. We have indeed set a map and certain areas, and we came to an agreement on that previously 100 years ago on where China should take over and what land on what territory we actually own. The Pacific is actually none of yours, as it is international waters.
Okay. I respond to it later.
Yep. Something for the closing statement. Good point. USA, thank you. And now a challenge from Taiwan. As you've seen, you get a response to the challenge, and then you can incorporate ideas.
So we have two claims to make against China, first of all, and so history may show that China has always sought to self-expand its territory over the world. Yet, what good is a small country like Taiwan to keep Taiwan in the one China policy that makes it from being an independent state or a country? So history shows that China has always sought to expand its empire, but what good is the small island like Taiwan that China needs to keep it in the one China policy and still be a part of the Republic of China, barring it from being an independent country?
Taiwan decided to split off from us of their own accord. That's none of our choice. And we will, just because Taiwan, a small piece of China, chose to separate from the mainland, we will not stop our ambition of trying to conquer more and trying to expand our territory. Just because Taiwan is indeed in the way and does claim 200 kilometers according to the UN agreements, but just because Taiwan has split off, They can't simply claim 200 kilometers, resulting in a huge area of the South China Sea being taken away from us.
Thank you, Taiwan. The last challenge
we have
for a closing statement will be from.
Okay.
Remind
them.
Sorry, make a final.
Pardon?
Do you have a response to that?
Oh no, we're gonna do another one, but we can do that.
Back it into your closing statement. I think that might be.
It's okay. We'll do it later.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll hear now from Philippines.
Okay, so superior authorities such as the UNCLOS, International Tribunal at The Hague, and the UN Convention all support our argument against your maritime grounds and gives Filipinos the right to fish within the Philippines EEZ. On top of that, documented evidence proves that the South China Sea have been common fishing ground for many other countries, not only China. This means that your claims on your 9-dash line are legally unwarranted. Why do you still insist that the South China Sea is yours?
Well, we mainly insisted that the South China Sea is ours because of the historical claims. As per 100 years ago, we stated that we claimed that area. But your main argument was the fishing factor.
And trading routes.
Trading routes?
Yeah, they have the South China Sea have been used by other countries, and like your claims do not give you the right to use it.
The 9-dash line, it does take over if China were to take over all of the South China Sea. The trade routes would still be active, and you would still be able to fish. It's just the oil reserves and the natural gases, approximately 7,500 square kilometers of the natural gases within the South China Sea would belong to us. It would not so much prevent you from fishing in the area, as you still have that land, that territorial claims outside your country. Outside your country. The South China Sea 9-dash line just takes the general area in the middle. It doesn't in fact stop the fishing or it does impact the trade routes, but it still allows them to pass through.
But your 9-dash line, like it cuts through our EEZ, our 200 miles. So you can still have like a lot of territory, but do not touch our EEZ.
That's our territorial claims.
Yeah, but
we also
according to the UN Convention, we have all the rights to use it for ourselves.
Then why aren't you using it?
Because of you.
Then you have to come to an agreement with us, because we want to try to end this in a positive way. But if we can't get what we want, we're ready to start work.
But then you say that you're not using your military power, you're only using it in case the US or whatever comes to attack you, and then now you're saying that you're ready to use it for us.
Yeah, because you're coming to encroach on our territory.
But it's our territory too. Your line is crossing through ours.
We're both claiming it's our territory.
Yeah, and then when we reported it to the UN and we got it went for us, but you guys didn't listen, so it's not.
That's why we're preparing the defenses.
And you have your EEZ plus that extra territory, so we should at least have our EEZ.
That is correct. That is correct as in we have our EEZ plus the territories. But what makes you think you should have our South China Sea when we claim?
No, we just want our EEZ.
We want our...
Which is within the South China Sea.
Yeah.
Very good question, and we'll answer that question in the closing statements. Ladies and gentlemen.
As a closing statement, I will make the summary of our own position. China have sovereignty over the South China Sea island, include the Dongshan Island, Xishan Island, the Zhongshan Islands, and Nanshan Islands. The islands of China of South China Sea have territorial sea areas and contiguous sea area. China's South China Sea islands have exclusive economy zones and continental shelves. China has historical rights in the South China Sea.
So, add on for the historical claims.
as we've mentioned before, Chinese officials has never said that South China Sea is China's territorial resources. The official position of China is the Nansha Islands are part of the Chinese territory. And to add on, I have two points to say. First, the South China Sea was first discovered and named by China. So as early as the Western Han Dynasty in the 2nd century BC, the Chinese essentials have discovered the South China Sea and named it. And there are records and documents to prove that. So in Nanzhou Foreign Body Record, the South China Sea were called Zhanghai at that time, and the reefs are called Qitou. And during the Three Kingdoms dynasty, Wan Zheng from the Wu Kingdom has wrote that inside of Zhanghai, which is the South China Sea, there are coral continents, rocks at the bottom of the continent. So you can clearly tell that we've discovered and we have explanations of that coral reefs inside of South China Sea. And the second point, the South China Sea islands were first developed and operated by China. So since the 5 dynasties period, there were fishermen from China collect pearls, and in the late South Song dynasty, the Nansha Islands have become the main fishery of China.
15 seconds.
The Chinese government upheld the peaceful settlement of the international dispute. Negotiation will resolve the territorial border issue fairly, reasonably, and amicably. So, but we do not have to make any drastic moves and can still adhere to the principle of the shaving disputes and jointly exploiting them. So, on the behalf of the whole China, we will continue in upbeat tone, as we do not wish the issue to result a war, but we will not give up to recover our territory, and we should adopt a clear attitude and not rule out of choice. And yeah.
We'll hear now from Japan. Closing statement.
We believe that South China Sea is a globally prominent shipping passage for every nation around the world. For nearly 42% of Japan's trade comes from South China Sea. And for instance, one of our important trading partners, Vietnam, we obtain about $3.3 billion of crude oil from them, which they obtain from their EEZ. We believe that every nation should claim their righteous territory in South China Sea, according to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Yeah.
So even though we don't want to claim territory in the South China Sea, we believe Japan will help our allies resolve this endless territorial dispute. Unlike China, who is attempting to take control over this entire South China Sea by herself, Japan promises to keep the sea open to other countries. That's it.
Thank you, Japan. We'll hear now from Vietnam. Closing statement.
Start off.
What's up, your... Okay. In response to some of the claims that China has made, we would, and to conclude our views on this debate today, we would like to remind China that in sinking a fishing ship well within our EEZ, it has left about 20 people to die, and also in a blatant attempt of expansionism. If China wishes to grow its economic power, it can continue to do so by engaging peacefully in trade that is in accordance with international law as per the United Nations. As the current claims of China, the 9-dash line, which are based only on somewhat unsubstantiated historical claims, seem to us that can be decried as, in the strongest possible terms, as pure greed in order for Chinese imperialism to gain control over the South China Sea region and the countries around it.
Vietnam is just disappointed with China because in the past, when settling disputes like regions like Hong Kong and Macau, you have successfully done it without killing anybody and without cutting off economic income for some citizens of our country. You want anything? No? Okay.
Thank you, Vietnam.
No?
Now from the USA.
I thought you were going to say something.
Okay, so China's tenuous right to the South China Sea doesn't give them the right to disrupt the economics of the countries who use the South China Sea for trade. China claims to desire a peaceful resolution, but their actions speak otherwise. China hasn't proposed any way to come to a resolution that doesn't break maritime laws and imposes on surrounding countries' territory.
China's claim to the South China Sea is backed only by their word, which isn't substantial enough for other countries to relinquish their rights to the other parts of the South China Sea. China has used the bases they built to bully other smaller countries instead of only for defense, as they stated before. If another country had claimed the South China Sea before China did, would you let them?
As the U.S., we believe that we can bring peace to the region and by proposing a solution that all countries in the area claim claim a 200-mile EE zone as stated in international law. Thank you.
Thank you, USA. Taiwan.
As said by the Chinese government before, they do not want to use violent acts to take over areas of islands, although this has been tested up against as the use of the cabbage method, also known worldwide as the way that Chinese use their military ships to block in islands and eventually starve the citizens within those islands. This does indeed show violence. In addition, that you've before said that this is international waters, which also means that both there's international waters and international air, and so every single country should have the right to both use their way of transportation by ships and by planes to fly over the South China Sea. Although a lot of flights have been tested up against through the Chinese government by saying that they need an approval of this method and of this way of transportation in such order, which does not prove any proclaimed areas in that some presumed territory and that the government for some reason needs an approval of this.
So China's ambition in becoming the next global economic leader would take a big toll on the countries as well as Taiwan, according to their economic development, and so this would hinder our trade if they took over the South China Sea, and we think that China, they're pressurizing each country, and so we think that China should agree to their 200-mile EEZ and shouldn't take over more territory, as we do not want further conflict and possibly a war.
So we hope for China to give us an individual voice and actually to negotiate in a peaceful manner and leave political disputes out of this argument, because we feel that we need sort of, I guess, less aggression and more like to focus more on, say, joint territory and to put less attention on the historical claims that you previously had, because there are a lot of modern, I guess, issues that I feel are more important than what you guys have historically. So, yeah, thank you.
Taiwan. Finally, last closing statement from Philippines.
Just go fast.
Hello. So, the Philippines are against the man-built islands done in the islands, as they expand their lands and they're using it for military bases. Earlier, they said to most countries that they would not use it unless we were asking for war, yet they told us that if we did not listen to them or not back off, they would start a war with us. The Philippines have tried to resolve peacefully this issue at the UN, and they went for us. So, yet China did not listen and still continues to go over our 200 EEZ line, and yeah.
So basically, the Philippines claim that them using our area or even the ocean in general to get the resources won't affect us. It won't harm us in any ways. But it might not directly harm us at first. But the long-term effects of drilling up oil and natural gas is devastating on both the environment and like long-term future us. Now, if we want to care for both us and the environment and the earth in general, we have to protect this area. So we also don't want, you also claim that you want to resolve this issue peacefully, but you guys, one, creating military bases, getting ready to fight, and two, sinking a fishing ship, directly killing people, is peaceful. If you guys want to say that's peaceful, then I just have to say that you're blatantly lying, you know? So the British took over many countries. You guys say that you guys took over the ocean a while back, so therefore it's yours. But the British also took over countries and things like that, but they don't possess them anymore. Why should, like, if Britain came out and said, oh, Australia's ours the next day, would you say that's okay too? So there's also no evidence that there's also no evidence that China has historically exercised authorization or control over this water, and they allowed other people to fish in it and take resources, and until it was discovered that there's a bunch of natural resources in this ocean. So yeah, you guys just want to exploit the natural resources there, and I'm against it. Yeah. Thank you very much.